Hey, I want to talk about the Scooby-Doo show episode Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats. As an old person on the internet, before I was able to upgrade to DVDs, I had VHS tapes. One of those VHS tapes was Scooby-Doo's Spookiest Tales. The episodes included on this were the Scooby-Doo Where Are You episodes, Which Witch is Which, That Snow Ghost, A Gaggle of Galloping Ghosts, and the Scooby-Doo show episode Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats. Something funky about the VHS version of this release has to do with the episode I'm talking about in particular, actually. The master used for the VHS version is a work-in-progress copy of the episode, and the DVD has the finished one that ultimately aired on ABC. Or so I'm told. If that is not correct, do not cite me as your source. I will be angry. Anyway, I'll touch on that a little more later. The releases of this episode and season in general are pretty funky. The second season of the Scooby-Doo show has never really been released on home video in full before. You can get some of the episodes on compilation DVDs or VHS tapes, but no full season releases like the first and third. I have to assume this is due to the first season being branded on home video as the Scooby-Doo Dynamite Hour, and the third being billed as Season 3 of Where Are You, both in accordance with how they were sometimes billed during original airing. Even this episode itself was billed under Scooby's All-Star Life Olympics originally. If you're not a hardcore Doo fanatic, you might be confused by a complete second season release if you can't find the first and third seasons in a matching title. The episode in question today, however, can also be found on a second compilation DVD titled Scooby-Doo and the Vampires. I actually bought this DVD cheaply last year to be able to own the episode and was disappointed in how bad the video quality was for the master they used here. Like, it looks very poor, so instead I'm going to use visuals from the digital release. For some reason it looks as pristine as the other seasons typically do, which makes that DVD's quality even more bizarre. Guess that's another mystery. Thankfully, you can obviously find the whole season digitally for purchase as streaming, so even without DVDs, there's at least that. So what is this episode? Why was the Spookiest Tales thing relevant? Well, sorry for the tangent, I'll get to it all, but like I said, I had this episode on VHS growing up. That means I watched these particular episodes a lot. The biggest thing I remember about it, though, is how terrifying the vampire was in this thing. Scooby-Doo does not generally give me nightmares, but this episode did. Look at this design and listen to this thing growl and tell me this is not child nightmare fuel. As someone that grew up to love horror, this pleases me, but this episode has definitely stuck with me for having the only Scooby-Doo villain to ever actually frighten me. Spoiler time! The episode sees the gang travel to Skull Island, which, yeah, of course shit's gonna go down there, so that they can visit Daphne's friend Lisa for her birthday. Now that Lisa's turning 18, she's set to inherit the family hotel located there. Not sure if it would be worth much though. I don't know how interested I would be in staying the night on Skull Island. I mean, there's a literal Undertaker convention happening during all of this. Just coffins everywhere. It's pretty clear what kind of business they get. Even worse, Daphne encounters an actual vampire. Again, this is the kind of person interested in staying on Skull Island. After calling her with a ringing sound earlier, it turns out the vampire got into her room, which is normally Lisa's, through the ventilation duct. This is another aspect that really frightened me as a kid. That's such a scary thought, a vampire just popping in through the vent that easily. I had enough to worry about as a kid. After finding a dog whistle, the gang meets with Lisa's Uncle Leon, who explains that this guy was unfortunately a real vampire and that it, runs in the family. It's not just any vampire, it's her grandfather. You would think this would have come up sooner, but sure, yeah, he wanted to protect her. A lot of good that did. Lisa ends up answering the phone only to hear a ringing, which then, of course, turns her into a vampire. Eventually, after finding another clue, they find Lisa in a coffin and wake her back up. With enough evidence, they set a trap and unmask Gramps the Vamp as Uncle Leon. He had hypnotized Lisa with the ringing and dog whistle tricks in hopes of proving she was mentally unfit to inherit the hotel, and it would go to him by default after. Lisa then, of course, rewards the gang and they live happily ever after. Except, for Lisa, I guess. They never had her uncle remove the hypnosis, so every time she hears a ringing like that during the remainder of her life, she's just gonna think she's a vampire again. That's kinda shitty. One plus to the episode I haven't mentioned yet is that it has Scooby-Dum.
It's too low.
Voiced by Dawes Butler, he's Scooby's cousin. Sometimes, like here, he's his brother. It's unclear, but I love him. The executives are hardcore against ever bringing back Scrappy, which makes me sad, not to be controversial, but can we at least bring back Scooby-Dum? He only appeared in 4 episodes ultimately, but he was always one of my favorites. Daphne's friend Lisa is also voiced by the late great Janet Waldo.
I know, we'll switch. You two can have my room down the hall, and I'll sleep here tonight.
You might know her as Judy Jetson, Penelope Pitstop, or Josie of the Pussycats. She's very charming in everything she does, and she really sells you on Lisa's plight for a character that has only ever appeared in the 1 episode. I know I'm gay, but I totally had a crush on Lisa when I was little. Like I mentioned before, despite the Spookiest Tales DVD at the time having the supposed final master, the VHS release included a master of the rough version of the episode for some reason, including shots later entirely redrawn or replaced. Some shots in the final version are actually clearly more rough as well. In this shot, Scooby-Dum just chuckles instead of saying smile. Several sound effects are changed out at times. Mr. Dracula in the rough version is voiced by Fred's voice actor Frank Welker instead of Shaggy's Casey Kasem as in the final.
Would you be kind enough to help me carry this into the next room?
Would you be kind enough to help me carry this into the next room?
Velma's line where she says rat instead of bat is now fixed, but with poor editing instead of a new line read.
And that rat was real enough. And that rat was real enough.
As a voice actor and audio editor, this one frustrates me. And there are so many other differences. You can actually find a detailed list on the Scooby Wiki page for the episode if you want to compare all of them yourself, or you can easily look up the comparisons here on YouTube. This episode has been aired and released and cut up in so many ways over the decades. Actual documentation on how this happened, in what vault, where, and when isn't available because this is Scooby-Doo, but it's a super interesting little oddity about this particular episode that already tends to fascinate me on its own. It's not exactly the most obscure topic either, and I'm not bringing anything new to the table here. I just find it very fascinating. If you didn't know about this part before and learned something weird today, cool! If you knew and came here for more info, sorry! Anyway, the vampire from Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats is, in my opinion, definitely one of the more actually frightening villains in the Scooby canon, and I think he deserves a little more respect. It's an episode that definitely shouldn't be overlooked just because it falls into the weird patch of episodes that's in a different circulation from the rest sometimes, outside of reruns of course. So, that's all I had to say. I don't know what other things I would talk about here on this channel, probably Scooby-Doo things at some point, hopefully something with a little more bite to it than this shorter video. Maybe you have a suggestion, I would like to know it, or maybe I would not. What do the DoTubers do at this point in their video? Like and subscribe for Scooby Snacks. Bye!